This is Beyond the Big Screen podcast with your host, Steve Guerra.
This is part 2 of an episode discussing the story behind the 1980 Miracle on Ice Team USA men's gold medal hockey team as portrayed through the 2004 movie Miracle. I highly suggest you listen to part 1 of this episode before we drop the puck on part 2. Don't worry, we'll be waiting for you beyond the big screen. Herb Brooks got this team together just when they're getting ready to go to Lake Placid for the Olympics. They played a series of games against different teams. How did those turn out for the Team USA team? Did Herb Brooks demonstrate in those early games that they were ready to take on this Soviet juggernaut team?
I'll give you two examples. One is famous. Anybody who knows the story is gonna know this one. They played Team Norway, and they tied them 3-3. In Herb's mind, that is a game they should have won outright, no two ways about it. They should have destroyed Team Norway because Herb had been training them so hard that they were in the best shape of their lives. He said that you might not be the most skilled team in this tournament, but I swear to God, you will be the most conditioned. And it's funny, I have to deviate for a second. With my own local team, the Blue Jackets, we got a new president of hockey operations a few years ago. I don't know if he consciously borrowed this from Herb or if it was just the planets aligning or what, but he said, we might not be the most talented team out there, but we will be the best conditioned. We will play all 60 minutes. And I thought, that is a really good way to do it, because you can lose a game in the flick of a switch. I mean, it's very easy, and so you want to play all out all the time, and that's what Herb was doing to them and getting them in shape for. Because if they couldn't do that against a quote unquote puny little team like Norway, how would they ever do it against the very best, against the Soviets, who were routinely beating all-star teams from the NHL? How could they possibly accomplish that if they can't beat Team Norway? He caught several players looking into the stands, and this is featured in the film, looking at some attractive young ladies and thinking about where they'd like to take them for dinner. And Herb caught him. And he says at the end of this really embarrassing 3-3 tie, you don't want to skate during the game, you'll skate right now. So They get back on the ice, and then that is what leads to the famous Herbies in the dark scene. And he skates them into the ground, red line to red line to blue line, so on and so forth down the length of the ice. And when they're done, he has them do it again and again and again and again. And he's yelling at them the whole time. He wants them to get through their head that this is the way it has to be. If they're going to compete, this is the way it has to be. So that's where that famous scene comes from. Now, the movie makes it seem like it's going on all night, and people are puking and all of this stuff. And in reality, the session lasted about an hour. I'm not saying that skating all out for an hour is easy. It's not. But no players reported throwing up or anything like that. But and really, that attitude of Herb's, that doesn't let up until they have the gold medal. Even after they beat the Soviets, he's still eyes on the prize all the way. And the other game that I want to touch on is the exhibition match between the Soviets and USA. And that takes place on February 9th at Madison Square Garden. Whoever's listening, if you want to see a butt kicking, pull up some game footage of this game. The Soviets destroy Team USA 10-3. They do it with one glove tied behind their back. I mean, it's pathetic. And that happens all of 3 days before opening night. So those are the two big exhibition games that we really talk about today. Is the one that resulted in them getting their butts kicked physically by Herb Brooks, and then getting their butts kicked on the scoreboard by the Soviet Union.
Going into this 1980s Olympics, who were the favorites and how was Team USA favored in this? Were they expected to medal, not medal?
The USA was expected to basically be destroyed. They were picked to finish fifth, I believe. And the Soviets were picked to just walk with the gold medal. And they were the absolute best in the world. And Czechoslovakia, at the time, they were the second best team in the world. And the fact that Team USA ends up facing both of them and emerging victorious is really incredible. So yeah, it was Soviet Union, and then the Czechoslovakia, and then it was all the rest.
How did Team USA fare in the earlier part of the Olympic tournament?
Okay, yeah, their first game against Sweden, they almost lost. They actually tied the game with something like 27 seconds left on the clock. And this tie will actually come into play later in the tournament. And had they lost to Sweden, they would have been in big trouble. Even if every result of every other game had remained the same, a loss in that first game to Sweden, they would have been in big trouble. So this opening game, they're down 2-1 with less than a minute to go, and Jim Craig keeps looking at the bench at Herb Brooks. Now, someone looking at that game through 21st century eyes knows exactly what Jim Craig is looking for. Back in the 1980s and earlier, they might not have known what he was looking for. But anyone today will tell you that he's looking at Herb to see if he's going to be pulled from the ice for a sixth attacker. Because you could have 6 men on the ice at one time, 5 skaters and a goalie, or you could play all 60 minutes with no goalie and 6 skaters if you really wanted to. So Jim Craig is waiting to be waved over to the bench. So about the 30-second mark, he gets the wave, he goes over to the bench, and with 27 seconds left and this extra attacker now on the ice, Team USA is able to tie the game and essentially, even though they didn't know it at that point, truly keep their hopes alive to medal at all. I mean, they lose that game and they might not have gotten a medal at all. That proves to be a very, not even important, crucial game for them. And then they go undefeated the rest of the initial round against the other teams. And one of those teams, as we mentioned earlier, was the second best team in the entire world, the Czechoslovakians. And they didn't just beat the Czechs, they pummeled them. They beat them 7-3. And that is kind of its own miracle because of how good they were. And to give you an idea, to put this into perspective of how good they were, the Soviet Union was only worried about one team in this tournament, and that was the Czechs. That's all they were worried about. They thought if we can get by the Czechs, forgive me for saying, we're golden. But that didn't happen. Team USA beat the ever-loving snot out of the Czechs, and suddenly the Soviets we don't have to worry about the Czechs. This is fantastic. All we have to do is beat a bunch of kids. And so that was very much a miracle all on its own because Team USA wasn't supposed to win that game, but they were so well prepared and so well conditioned that they just took everyone by surprise.
Getting into this game, the big game against the Soviets, what will be later called the Miracle on Ice game, what was so important about this game? I mean, obviously they're playing the Soviets. What was critical about who won this game in particular?
Well, this whoever won this game would essentially have the best chance at winning gold. Because whoever would win Team USA versus Soviet Union would then go on to play Finland. And the Soviets had already beaten Finland. Now, granted, they had to come from behind in order to do it earlier in the tournament, but they'd already beaten them. So that if they can get by the US, then they're going to be fine. But it's so huge in maybe a broader sense, I guess, just because of all of the and I'm too young to really know the ins and the outs of the Cold War, but with all of the political stuff going on then, Russia invading Afghanistan and all of that, and them swearing to boycott the next Olympics that are going to be in the Soviet Union, then, you know, and then the near miss on the Soviets boycotting the Lake Placid Olympics. I mean, they almost boycotted that themselves. Herb Brooks, he almost had a heart attack thinking that he wouldn't get a chance to prove himself against the greatest team in the world. That he wanted to play the Soviets. He wanted to play them so badly because he knew he could beat them. So that's why it was important. It was important to Herb. It was important to the entire country. And when you can take down, anytime you can win is great, but when you can take down the very best on your way to doing it, that has to be the pinnacle. You know, like today, these days, who do we want to beat in Olympic ice hockey? We want to beat Canada because they're the best. But we fall short so frequently. They had to beat them because they were the best, and that's just the way it was.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors. That was a very exciting game. What was the brief overview of that game and some of the highlights of it?
The box score is as follows: 2 for the U.S. in the first period, 2 for the Soviet Union. Second period, none for the U.S., 1 for the Soviet Union. Third period, 2 for the U.S., 0 for the Soviet Union. So we have this kind of ragtag group of college kids who 13 days earlier get curb stomped in Madison Square Garden by the Soviet Union, 10-3. Fast forward not even 2 weeks, and these kids are hanging with the best team in the world every stride of the way. And so the Soviets open the scoring, and Vladimir Krutov is the one who knocks that one in. And Buzz's initial goal is really, it's a great goal, but it's so intelligent. It shows what a great hockey mind he had. So he gets a pass from Mark Pavlich, and Pavlich is on the right side of the ice, and Schneider is on the left. Pavlich passes to Schneider. Schneider's screaming down the ice, and Vladislav Tretiak, the Soviet goaltender, was previously focused on Pavlich. He tracks the puck across the ice to Schneider, and in doing so, one would think, well, you've got to move your body. If you want to square up to the shooter, you've got to move your body. And so that's what he did. But what Tretiak does is he overcommits going right. And Schneider sees this and catches Tretiak mid-motion. Schneider's shot, he winds up and he's aiming for the right side of the net. But he is such a quick thinker that he is able to adjust his shot mid-windup and aim over Tretiak's left shoulder. Well, Tretiak is still moving to the right, so now Schneider has all of this open net in front of him, and he buries this shot that, had Tretiak not overcommitted, he would have saved probably no issue whatsoever. So then Sergei Makarov for the Soviet Union, about 3.5 minutes later, he gives the Soviets another lead. And time is winding down. Still the first period. We're down 2-1. It's all right. Still got plenty of hockey left, but time is winding down in the first period. And if there are any young hockey players listening, let this be a lesson that you play to the buzzer. You play to the whistle. You play no matter what until somebody is pulling you away from the play because the clock has expired. You just keep playing. And here's why. There's about 10 or so seconds left in the first period. And Tretiak, the goalie, and 2 defensemen are just kind of gawking up at the clock. And they're assuming the period is over. You never want to do that, like I said. So what ends up happening is we get one of the most famous moments from this game. So now there's about 7 seconds left, a guy named Steve Christian has the puck. He takes a slap shot from beyond center ice, which, I mean, you'll see that a million times, and it, nothing ever comes of it. Puck goes in on Tretiak. He kicks it away. Probably could not have given the man an easier save. But this is where Tretiak, and his defensemen really, really screw up. Like I said, they're looking at the clock. Tretiak should have kicked the puck into the corner or, into the boards, because that would nullify any further attempt, likely. But instead, he kicks it out in front of him. And who has just come onto the ice but Mark Johnson, whose nickname is Magic, and nicknamed Magic for a very good reason. His teammates called him the Wayne Gretzky of their team. And so he gets off the bench, he scoops up the puck, and the Soviet D-men, they're like, oh, who is this kid thinking he's going to do something? They make the weakest attempt to even stop him, and as a result of that, he splits right through him and starts drifting to Tretiak's right side. And Tretiak is thinking, well, there's no time left. One, he's not going to get a shot off. I can probably poke it away. I don't really have to try, whatever. Well, Johnson ends up going far enough to Tretiak's right side that even a sprawling to the ice Tretiak can't get to the puck. Johnson slips it right under his blocker side into the net, and it's a goal. And it's tied 2-2. A group of kids has carried a tie into the locker room for the first period against the greatest team in the world. Now, to circle back to play to the buzzer, Mark Johnson's goal came at 19 minutes, 59 seconds. That's 1 second away from being expired. Now, there actually was a brief protest on Tretiak's part and Coach Tikhonov's part that the clock had actually expired and the goal shouldn't be allowed. But it ended up not being the case. Goal counted, whatever. So yeah, then they go into the locker room tied with the greatest hockey team in the world. So then what happens in the locker room? Before the game, Herb Brooks gave his boys a speech that is super famous because of the movie. And even though it's a little inaccurate, he read it off a piece of paper and doesn't say much in the second intermission. Doesn't say much at all. Now we go across the hall to the Soviet dressing room. What's going on in there? Coach Viktor Tikhonov, who I know we didn't touch on him a lot, Viktor Tikhonov ruled his team the exact opposite way that Anatoly Tarasov did. Tarasov, like I said, ran his team with love and compassion, and he said, you guys are playing hockey, you should be smiling. And Tarasov's daughter, Tatiana, said he looked at those boys like they were his own son. And Viktor Tikhonov was a monster. He was the exact opposite in every way. He ruled with threats and fear and withholding certain things. I mean, like I said, the guy kept his players at camp 11 months out of the year. You want a new car? All right, well, do this for me. We'll see how you play. And we'll see about getting you a new car. You want to see your family? Well, we'll see how you play. We'll see what you do for me. Any protest, any dissension, I know a guy who can have you in Siberia working on the front lines in the real army, not this Red Army hockey team. I could have you there real quick and you'll never get out. So the locker room, Tikhonov is just laying into his players. He is tearing them apart. And he singles out Vladislav Tretiak, the goaltender. And he's saying, how could you allow these soft goals, from these kids and blah, 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 blah. And so he tells Tretiak that he's not playing anymore. You're not playing in the game anymore. And he gets pulled, and the backup goaltender, Vladimir Mishkin, finishes the game. And it was meant to send a message to the rest of the team but it didn't work. The Soviet players reported that when Tretiak was out of the net, as good as Mishkin was, and he was good, there was a void in their team on the ice, and they just felt like there was nothing that could be done about it. So they really got dealt a mental blow when Tretiak got pulled, and of course we all know what happened. They end up losing, and Viktor Tikhonov ends up years later saying that pulling Tretiak was the biggest mistake of his career, and he just so regretted it. And what's so interesting about Tretiak is, yes, he did let in these soft goals. He had 2 previous games in the tournament, one against Canada, one against Finland, where he also let in 2 soft goals. But not just in this tournament, but in his entire history as a goaltender, you can track his performances based on soft goals. Anytime he let in a soft goal, he comes out better than he went into the locker room. He comes out and he slams the door. He means business. And I think he described himself something like, I turn into beast when I've let in soft goals, something like that. I forget the exact quote. But he didn't get that opportunity to turn into a beast because he got pulled. So Mishkin is in. And then the second period starts, and the Soviets, they score again. And the Soviets just dominate in that period. I mean, they outshoot the Americans 12-2, and it's just all USSR, 100%. Alexander Maltsev scores only 2 minutes and 18 seconds into the period, and it looks like that goal plus the amazing shot differential, 12-2. It looks like maybe the Soviets are going to walk away with this thing. They've turned on the burners, and then it goes to the second intermission. The Americans don't score. It's 3-2 with 20 minutes left, and they come back out onto the ice. Now, this is historically where the Soviet Union just murders teams, just murders them. The third period is their period. They dominate like nobody else. And why? Because they are so well conditioned. They skate teams into the ground so much in the first 2 periods that by the time the third period comes around, they're fine. And their competitors, the opposition, has no prayer of keeping up because they're just not conditioned the way the Soviets are. So they go into the third period thinking, same story as it's always been. They went into games knowing they would win, and their opponents went into games knowing the Soviet Union would win. That's just how good they were and how terrifying they were. So then we have the tying goal, 3-3. And it's I'll get to it in a minute, but it is one of the most bizarre goals probably ever. So Herb Brooks' plan for the third period is to keep his players' shifts on the ice to between 30 and 45 seconds. Now, at that time, a minute 45 on the ice was completely normal. But Brooks knew that in order to skate with the Soviets, he would have to do short shifts, very short shifts. And that's another Brooksian thing that carried over to today's game. You'll see the much shorter shifts. And you can skate harder, and you allocate that energy that you're spending throughout the game as opposed to, just the first 2 periods like everyone had been doing. So he asks Dr. Nagabads, who's the team physician, to have a stopwatch ready and keep track of the players' shifts. And when it hits between 30 and 45 seconds, to give Brooks a signal, and then he would bring them in, send the next line out. And the movie, I believe, only shows Brooks implementing this tactic in about the final maybe 10 minutes of the game, but in reality, he actually did it through the entire third period. Now, that's brilliant all on its own, because he did not play the first 2 periods that way. It was the Soviets thinking, oh, okay, the Americans have skated with us to this point, but that's nothing new because now it's the third period and their legs are gone. Well, Herb pulls this last little trick out of his sleeve, and now suddenly his skaters are skating much shorter shifts. And in fact, to show you how little the Soviets were catching on, Vladimir Petrov of the Soviet Union skates over to Dr. Nagabadze during a break in the play, and Nagabadze spoke Russian. He had escaped the Iron Curtain, I want to say in his, maybe not his youth, but maybe like his teen years. But in any case, he spoke Russian. So Petrov skates over to him, and he says, "What are they doing? What's with these short shifts that you guys are doing?" Nagabadze looks at him and says, "Go ask your coach." And, like he's going to let him in on the secret of what's going on. So, I have to think that had Herb been doing this the whole game, they very well could have caught on. So now this just incredible tying goal. The puck ends up on Dave Silk's stick. Okay, he cuts through the U.S. offensive zone, and he is knocked to the ice. Now, in a lot of circumstances, that's the end of the play. But he sticks with it. Before he hits the ice, he manages to get a pass off to Mark Johnson, once again, Mark Magic Johnson, who is again streaking toward the goal. Johnson corrals the puck, puts it through Vladimir Mishkin's legs. The pass and the goal on its own, fantastic, amazing. But where this goal gets so interesting is that it first bounces off the defenseman's, who might have been Boris Mikhailov, I'm not sure, bounces off his stick before it reaches Johnson's stick and before he puts it into the goal. In later years, Vladimir Mishkin was interviewed about this goal, and he swears, absolutely swears, that not only did the puck go off, the defenseman's stick, but it bounced off the stick and through the hole in the defenseman's skate where the blade meets the boot. And if you've ever seen a hockey skate, that space is not very big. I mean, it might be about the size to fit a puck through. So he swears all day long that this puck went through and then still ends up on Johnson's stick, and he puts it through Mishkin's leg. So if that story is true, that is probably the luckiest goal in the history of ever. So now it's 3-3, and the 10-minute mark is approaching. 10 minutes left in the game, it's tied. The U.S., they're just happy to be tied this late in the game and to not look embarrassed. So Buzz Schneider, he gets the puck blasted in from center ice, and then Mishkin does what Tretiak should have done in the first period. He directs it into the corner, and it starts to trickle up the boards toward the benches. So the Soviets are going for the puck. Harrington from Team USA is going toward the puck, and it kind of bounces over everybody's stick. And then right behind that whole mess of players is USA's Mark Pavlich. And he falls, but very similar to the last goal, he manages to get a pass off. And that pass ends up in the center of the ice in Team USA's offensive zone. And it ends up on the stick of Captain Mike Eruzione, whose name in Italian means eruption. So that couldn't be more appropriate for what's about to happen. So Mike Eruption gets the puck, and he cuts to the right side of the ice. From his opposite foot, that is to say the foot that you're supposed to leave on the ice when you're taking a shot, he does it backward. And I don't know that this little mix-up had any effect on confusing the goalie. Maybe it did. Body parts can do weird things to goalies if something comes at them that they're not used to seeing. So he snaps a shot from the wrong leg, and it goes right by Mishkin on the right, and it's in the back of the net.
And now, a brief word from our sponsors.
Team USA is up 4-3. There's 10 minutes left in the game. Eruzione's goal comes at exactly the 10-minute mark, 10:0:00. And so now, now they're winning. That's great, but now they're playing against a desperate Soviet Union team who's got to tie this game. they've got to do everything they can. They've got to pull out every trick that they know. They just start pounding Jim Craig, the goaltender for USA, with everything they have. And he's stopping everything. Now, this entire game, Craig reported that he was in like this trance-like state. Anybody who's played sports has probably been in that state of mind that you could call being in the zone. Well, if there was ever a person in the zone, Jim Craig was the guy. He was battling a sinus infection throughout the entire tournament, and he had a floating bone chip in his ankle that he needed cortisone shots for. He could barely stand on some occasions. So he is just playing lights out, stopping everything, and defensemen are dropping in front of pucks. They're blocking shots. They're clearing the puck down, and clock is ticking further and further down, further and further down. And Herb starts, just telling his guys to play their game. That's in the movie, and that really did happen. So he's telling them to just play their game, do what they know how to do. Clock is ticking, and Herb starts kind of looking around like, why hasn't Coach Tikhonov pulled Vladimir Mishkin from the net yet to get a sixth attacker? He's even warning his team, get ready for the sixth attacker. It's coming. And Tikhonov never pulls him. Why didn't he pull him? Because he didn't believe in the tactic. He never even really considered it, because that's not how Russians play hockey. That's not what we do. And so before you know it, we're all hearing Al Michaels' famous line, "Do you believe in miracles?" The buzzer sounds. Everybody's screaming. And old bone chip ankle Jim Craig is getting mobbed by his teammates. And Team USA outshot 39-16 by Team USSR, and they win the game 4-3. And that's the end of the story. Like, it's what an incredible way to beat the best team in the world.
And really, after this, it's a bit anticlimactic. The Team USA does win the gold medal. Just basically what happens at the end, because it's obviously not completely guaranteed that they're going to win the gold medal after this game.
It's not, and that's where my comment earlier about the tie versus Sweden becomes so important. If they lose that game, then they likely do not medal, because of the way the tie-breaking system was set up back then. It relied a lot on goal differential. The fact that they had no losses was very, very favorable for them. Now all they had to do was beat Team Finland. If they beat Team Finland, the gold is theirs, no problem. Their work was far from done. If they lost to Team Finland, Team Sweden somehow manages to play out of their minds and tie the Soviet Union. Because of the goal differential, the Soviet Union would have the better goal differential and thus would get the gold medal. So Team USA, they have to win. They have to beat Team Finland. They've just got to do it. And the players kind of have a momentary lapse. They kind of forget that there's still a game to play. And Coach Brooks catches them, several of them, the next day, signing autographs, taking pictures, hanging out with girls, answering questions, doing all of this stuff that he has spent the last year beating out of them. He catches them doing it on the eve before their final game. And he rounds them up and he says, "What are you guys doing? Like, you guys are acting like we've already won the gold medal. This is not over by damn sight. The team that we are playing, yes, they lost to Russia, but they forced Russia to have a come-from-behind victory. These guys are no slouches, and our work is not done." Captain Eruzione said that the practice prior to the game against Team Finland was the hardest practice that they ever did. Worse than training camp, worse than Herbie's in the dark, worse than anything. He said they were just dead. But Brooks did it to prove a point. He never, ever let up. until the job was done. And I think he's got to be praised for that. And the game against Team Finland, the Team USA has to again come from behind, and just as they've been doing all tournament, they're falling behind and then having these crazy come from behind victories. They fall behind, and the goal that truly does seal it, it's not the game-winning goal, but it's the goal that kind of puts the icing on the cake and really secures things, is Magic Johnson. Mark Magic Johnson gets a shorthanded goal while Team USA is on back-to-back penalty kills in the last 4 minutes of the game. So, one slip, and Finland could have tied and even won that game because of those penalties that an undisciplined Team USA took. So Johnson gets that securing goal, and that's it. But you're right, it is somewhat, and really in the movie too, it's anticlimactic. I think the whole tournament could really be called a miracle on ice, because at no point were these guys supposed to do much of anything. The Olympic Committee said, if we get a medal, great, let's just not get embarrassed. And then he takes a group of kids, or Brooks takes a group of kids, and they win the gold medal. And to me, the whole thing, not just the game against the Russians, is really a miracle.
Wrapping this episode up and wrapping up the Olympics and this Miracle on Ice game, what do you think of Olympics after this? Do they have that same magic that 1980 year had?
I don't think so. And I think for a number of reasons, one of which we touched on already, is that after this point, soon enough, the professionals start participating. And so you don't get those dreamers as much, I would say. Certainly not altogether. They're not gone altogether. Anybody who straps on a pair of skates probably dreams of hoisting the Stanley Cup someday. But just the magic of the Olympics as a whole, I think, kind of went away with that. They start to cost more, hundreds of millions and billions of dollars, whatever the cost is. They start to be, huge televised events, whereas the biggest game in this 1980s tournament, USA-USSR, it wasn't even broadcast live. It was all on tape delay. And so the Olympics now are they're a juggernaut, it's really pretty incredible. And Lake Placid today, as I understand it, is one of the few quote unquote small Olympics that you go to that town and you can tell, the Olympics used to be here, because they have preserved all of those memories, whereas other places that have gotten them haven't done that. And the Olympics now is to me they're still fun to watch, but I think that just that really special magic, maybe at least for the team sports, is maybe gone.
Yeah, Lake Placid is definitely a cool place if anybody out there can go there. It's not what you would expect, like Salt Lake City or Sochi or something like this, or Vancouver. It's a tiny town.
Yeah, I've heard that there's the main street, there's the Olympic Arena, the ice arena, and the former Olympic Village is now a minimum security prison. It's just this tiny little place that it's like you could blink and you could miss it. I've never been there. I'd love to go. It being in upstate New York, I'm not that far away. I could find it in my time to do it. But yeah.
What do you think so far right now? The 2018 Olympics is not finished as of the time of this recording. Have you been watching it?
I have, but with the time difference, it has been really, really tough. I enjoy the Winter Olympics because it lets me watch events that I wouldn't otherwise be interested in. Like, I have no interest in curling at all, like ever. But when it's on in the Olympics, it's kind of neat to watch. My wife and I sat down and we watched it a little bit, but it's so tough with the time change and working full-time job with a wife and kids and all this and you want to watch this, you better get up at 2:30 in the morning. So some people can do it, but I'm just not. I don't know. I'm just not 21 anymore.
Well, thank you so much again for coming on, Shane. We put this together at kind of the last moment, and I think it came together really well.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. It was a blast. I truly am grateful for you having me on. I know you've got a big audience, and I just really, really thank you for having me on. So anytime you want to talk hockey, I'm here for you, man.
And I'm definitely going to hold you to that. We're going to definitely find a way to talk about slap shots, 70s hockey. I don't think it gets any better than that.
Absolutely. And there's a great documentary on the quote unquote real life Chiefs in the QMJHL. So they were a tough, bruising junior hockey team, and they kind of modeled themselves after the Chiefs from the movie. So you want to talk slapshot? I'm all for it.
Yeah, the exact opposite of ballet on ice of the Team Russia.
Yes, exactly. Just cluster on ice.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Big Screen podcast. Of course, a big thanks goes out to Shane Guilfoyle of the History of Hockey podcast for joining us today. Links to learn more about Shane and the History of Hockey podcast can be found by searching History of Hockey podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Facebook, and any other podcatcher, or always as usual in the show notes. Now, if you're interested, you can learn more about Beyond the Big Screen, connect to Facebook page, Twitter feeds, and all the other things at a2zhistorypage.com. I'd love to hear also if you have any ideas for future guests, future movies, future show topics. You can send those to me through social media or by just emailing me at steve@a2zhistorypage.com. I love to get new ratings and reviews on Apple Podcasts. Those ratings and reviews definitely help me make the show better, but they also place you to win Beyond the Big Screen memorabilia and also other prizes and swag, if you will. We will have periodic drawings. All you have to do is leave a rating and review in iTunes or Apple Podcasts to be entered. I also would like to let you know that I included a link to watch the entire Miracle on Ice game that we discussed extensively in this episode for the 1980 Winter Olympics from a YouTube link, so you can definitely tune in and enjoy that game to go along with this episode. We will definitely see you next time beyond the big screen.